Our 2024-25 season previews continue on today with the Washington Capitals. The Capitals are a team that last year they broke in by 1 point. Actually, I think they tied the Red Wings, but they had the tiebreaker, so by 0 points, I guess if you want to call it that. But regardless, they still got in. They end up getting swept. They make a lot of changes in the offseason. It was a really interesting offseason in Washington, and we're going to get into it here in a second. But first off, I want to go back to 21-22, where this team, it was the last time they made the playoffs before they ended up missing in 22-23. That's the best way I can kind of explain it. They went 44, 26, and 12 for 100 points. They were 13th in the NHL that year. They ended up making it. They were actually the last team in the Eastern Conference to break into the playoffs, and they end up losing to the Florida Panthers in, I think, a 6-game series. It was a close match series compared to the fact that they were playing the President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers. Again, I thought that they did a pretty good job in that series, and they fought to the end, but it ended up not being enough for them. In 22-23, that was the year where they ended up missing the playoffs. They went 35, 37, and 10 for 80 points. They were 25th in the NHL, and they just ended up not being able to get in. It was a year that was disappointing for Washington. They dealt with injuries. The team seemed really slow, and that was the year where Backstrom and Oshie, I think, were both missing due to injuries. So that was the first year of that, and it showed that it made a big impact on the team. Now, they came kind of close. They were 25th, but they were 2 games below 500, but obviously it was not good enough for them to get into the playoffs. They had to be better the following year, and they were. They went a 40, 31, and 11 for 91 points. They were 17th in the NHL. They obviously made the playoffs. They were tied with Detroit. They had the tiebreaker, which was regulation wins. Again, very controversial. There were a lot of people who said, oh, they should not have been in the playoffs, myself included, but I've kind of since then said, well, they made it fair and square. They made it the way they should have. Again, of course, you want your favorite team to be in there, which my favorite team was in the mix, and the Capitals ended up making it over them, but obviously they ended up getting swept by the Rangers. There were points in that series where it was close, but it was a pretty dominated sweep by the New York Rangers there 100%. So, that's how it goes sometimes, unfortunately. So, you look at this past offseason. They recognized that they needed to make a lot of moves if they wanted to stay contenders, if they wanted to make the playoffs, or if they wanted to break the goal record, if they wanted Ovechkin to break the goal record. That's kind of how I see a lot of these moves that they made going. Now, again, let me go through them here first. Your departures: Nick Jensen, Darcy Kemper, Max Pacioretty, Beck Malston, and Nicholas Aube-Kubel. Those are 5 guys that honestly aren't huge losses. Jensen, I'd say, is your biggest loss. Good top 4 defenseman. Kemper was your 3rd string backup goalie at points because Charlie Lindgren kind of took over the net there for a point in the season. Pacioretty just didn't work out in Washington. Aube-Kubel, same thing. Malliston was a little bit confusing. He actually wasn't that bad, but then they ended up trading him, so a little bit of a surprise there. But regardless, the losses aren't that big. Your guys you brought in, they are Pierre-Luc Dubois, Brandon Duhaime, Andrew Mangiapane, Taylor Radish, Jacob Chikrin, Matt Roy, and Logan Thompson. So, honestly, I like a lot of those ads. Dubois, the first one, was one that I was a little bit questionable about because I think that, again, he struggled with LA. We don't know that yet. I think if Spencer Carberry can get Dubois motivated again, I think that could become a good acquisition because he has the talent, just the work ethic and the effort is really what lacks in Washington, or what lacks in Dubois in Washington. So, again, if he can fix that, that's really good. Duhaime, good 4th-line guy, maybe be a depth player at that. Mangiapane, good 2nd-line winger. Honestly, I like that ad a lot. Probably going to play on the 2nd line, maybe the 1st line with Ovechkin. Radish, I like as a depth player as well. You got Chikrin and Roy,
2 new guys added to your blue line. I think that's two pretty good adds. You got Chychrun for not a lot, and you signed Roy to a 6-year contract. And then Thompson, probably your backup goaltender, maybe a 1B situation there in Washington. I'm going to imagine, though, that he is your backup and Lindgren will be your starter. But again, Thompson is good enough that he could get that starting role and could be in that tandem, just like run a 1A, 1B situation there with that Washington goaltending. But still, pretty good ad. So I like what they did. I really do. I like the ads they brought in. I think there wasn't really one that really made me kind of like, I don't know, besides Dubois. That's the only one that questions me there. But your Hockey News projected lineup, it's not mine, it's the Hockey News's. You start off with your top 6, Alex Ovechkin, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Tom Wilson as your first line. Then you have Hendrix Lapierre, Dylan Strome, and Andrew Mangiapane as your second line. So a good top 6 there. I like Ovechkin on that left wing side. Again, it's Ovechkin. Come on. He's trying to get that goalie or get that goal record. I think he's a very good forward still at this point. Again, he might not be as good as he was in years prior, but he is still very good. Dubois, again, at that first line center role. Maybe him playing first line with Wilson and Ovechkin will benefit. That could really help him. And again, I like that second line. Lapierre, good young player. I thought he had a good year last year. Same with Dylan Strome. Often forgotten, to be honest with you. And then Mangiapane is also a underrated guy. But last year he struggled. He did. But he is a previous, I think, 30-goal scorer. So maybe with the right line mates, he can get back to what he was with the Calgary Flames in Washington. But obviously that's me just speculating. We'll see if that actually does happen. Now, you look at your bottom 6, you have Sonny Milano, Connor McMichael, and Alexi Protas as your third line. And you have Brandon Duhaime, Nick Dowd, and Taylor Raddysh as your fourth line. Then you have Ivan Moroznachenko and Michael Scarbosa as your extra depth. So, again, I like those guys they have in the bottom 6. I think McMichael, good third line center. Protas, good hard worker. Milano, good third liner at that point. Your depth is pretty solid. You have Duhaime there. I thought he was good in Minnesota. Or, sorry, not Minnesota, Colorado. Dowd, good fourth line center. And then Raddysh, we'll see how he can fit in there on that lineup. But overall, I like what they've put together in the forward core. I actually think it's pretty solid. But there is some what-ifs in Dubois and Mangiapane. Can those guys obviously develop well with that system? Now, you look at your blue line. Your blue line's pretty solid on paper. It's just a question of, can these guys do it on the ice? You have Chychrun and Karlsson as your first pairing. You have Sandin and Roy as your second pairing. And then you have Fehervary and Trevor Van Riemsdyk as your third pairing. And then you have Alexiev as your seventh defenseman. So that's a good defense. I like that third pairing. I like the first pairing too. A lot of offense, though. That's my only concern from that first pairing. That's why I kind of think there's a chance that Matt Roy and Chychrun might play together, because honestly, Roy's better defensively and Chychrun not that great defensively. So you may want to try and put those guys together, because maybe Karlsson and Chychrun's a good power play line, but those two guys together on the offense, they're good offensively. Defensively, it's like on and off, honestly. So we'll see there what happens with that. But I like the blue line. I think it's pretty good on paper. You look at your goaltending, you got Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson. Again, as I mentioned, you could go a 1A, 1B situation there, or you could just do Lindgren the starter. But honestly, I think either way, you're in a good spot. Lindgren proved himself as a good starting goalie last year. I don't think you're complaining whatsoever if you're Washington. I think they've done a pretty good job at building this team together. It's a really solid roster. We're going to see, though, I think it's honestly kind of a weak Metropolitan Division this year. I think you know what your top 3 is going to be. But apart from that, the wild card spots are kind of open for grabs. So maybe if Washington is good enough, they can pick up one of those again. But obviously, we'll see. So let's take a look at the Hockey News' yearbook here. You start off with their X Factor. After a disappointing season in LA, Dubois joins his 4th team in 5 years. Dubois' ice time was limited in Los Angeles, but a bigger role is envisioned in DC. With a hefty contract and a 4-year no-move clause, Dubois must deliver. So yeah, this is, I wouldn't say a make-or-break season for him, but this is a year where he has to pan out. He has to break through, or else we could be seeing a buyout on our hands, honestly. Or Washington is stuck with that long and brutal contract. So we'll see what happens there with Dubois. But again, I think if Carberry can get to him, I think they're in a good spot. But again, Washington, I do have a few questions, but I think overall they can put themselves in a pretty good spot. They do have a solid roster on paper. Again, it's just a matter of, can those guys pan out on the ice? That's your biggest question. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on the Washington Capitals. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and below. I really appreciate it. We're going to keep going on with these. We've got one more left in the Winnipeg Jets, which I will upload later today. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.